The snow fell quietly outside, painting the city in soft white silence. It was the kind of night that reminded Detective James Carter of everything he'd lost and everything he still had to protect. He sat by the window of his small apartment, staring at the flakes swirling under the streetlight. The reflection of his face on the glass looked older than his 38 years. Sleepless eyes, a jawline that hadn't smiled in too long. Behind him, a small voice broke the stillness. "Daddy, can we build a snowman tomorrow?" James turned. His son, Liam, stood in his pajamas, clutching a small blue teddy bear, the same one his mother had given him on his 3rd birthday. James forced a gentle smile. "Sure, buddy. Tomorrow morning, but only if you promise to go back to bed now." Liam nodded but didn't move. "Will Mom see it from heaven?" he asked softly. James froze. That question never got easier. He walked over, knelt beside him, and brushed Liam's hair back. "I think she will," James said. "She always loved the snow." Liam smiled, that innocent, trusting smile that still made James believe in something greater than pain. "Okay. Good night, Daddy." "Good night, champ." Liam climbed back into bed, hugging his teddy tight. James tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Sweet dreams." He turned off the lamp and stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching his son breathe. That was peace. Fragile, fleeting peace. When James finally returned to the living room, the silence felt heavier. He sat down, opened the case file that had been sitting untouched for hours. A new case. Airline sabotage threats. Anonymous messages sent to Skylift Airlines, warning that one of their planes would fall from the sky. The victim of the threats was Cernavca Vale, the company's CEO. Young, sharp, respected, and according to some tabloids, cold as the Arctic wind. James didn't care about gossip, but something about the case tugged at him. The messages weren't random. They were structured, coded. Whoever sent them knew things that weren't public. Still, James wasn't assigned to the case, yet. It was being handled by the Federal Division. He was only reviewing for consultation. That's how it started anyway. He reached for his coffee, only to find it cold. He sighed and leaned back. The clock read 11:47 p.m. Outside, the snow thickened, blanketing the city deeper into silence. Then, the phone rang, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the night. James grabbed it. "Detective Carter." "Carter, it's Bennett," said the voice on the other end. His captain. "Sorry to wake you, but we've got a situation." James straightened. "What kind of situation?" "There's been an attempted break-in at Skylift's headquarters. CEO's shaken up. Security's a mess. We need someone to coordinate until Federal arrives. You're the closest on the roster." "Copy that." On my way, James hung up and grabbed his coat. He walked quickly to Liam's room and looked at him, fast asleep, curled up under the blanket. He hesitated. Every fatherly instinct screamed not to leave, but duty called. He scribbled a note. "Had to step out for work. Be back soon. Love you, buddy." He left it on the bedside table, kissed Liam's head once more, and slipped out quietly. The drive to Skylift headquarters was slow. The streets were slick with snow, the city ghostly under streetlights. James's mind replayed the word break-in. He'd read the threats. Someone promising a disaster, a correction, whatever that meant. He didn't like patterns like this. He didn't like coincidences either. When he arrived, flashing lights bounced off glass towers. Police cruisers lined the street. The Skylift logo, a pair of wings, glowed faintly through the storm. James flashed his badge at the gate, stepped out, and walked inside. The cold bit through his gloves. The lobby smelled of ozone and fear. Security guards huddled near the entrance, one of them with a bandaged arm. "What happened?" James asked. "Two men. Masks. Tried to breach the executive floor," the guard said. "One of them had access codes." "That's impossible. Only top management knows those." James frowned. "And the CEO? In her office. She's refusing to leave." Of course she was. He'd read about Cernavca Vale. Stubborn, disciplined, known for handling crises personally. He took the elevator up to the top floor. The building creaked slightly in the wind. The storm outside was worsening. When the doors opened, the floor was dimly lit. Frost laced the huge windows, and there near the corner office stood a woman, tall, elegant, wearing a dark coat over a white blouse, her hair perfectly tied back despite the chaos. Cernavca Vale. She turned when she heard his footsteps. Her eyes, in sharp, gray, assessing, met his with calm control. "You must be Detective Carter," she said. "They told me you're here to handle things." "Just until Federal takes over," James replied. "Can you tell me what happened?" Her gaze didn't waver. "Someone broke in using my personal access code. That code only exists on one server. And in my head." "Then someone close to you leaked it," James said. "Or someone inside your department," she countered. He almost smiled. "You don't trust the police?" "I trust results," she said evenly. There was something in her tone, not arrogance, but exhaustion, the kind of steel people forge when they've been betrayed before. James noticed a small tremor in her hand as she held a file folder. She wasn't as calm as she looked. "Ms. Vale," he said quietly, "whoever did this, they weren't just trying to scare you. They wanted something." She hesitated, then placed the file on the desk. "Flight 92, our cargo division. It crashed 3 months ago in the Alps. Officially, it was weather-related, but I've received messages suggesting otherwise." James opened the file. Black box transcripts, photos of debris, names of victims. One name caught his eye. Dr. Raymond Keller, aerospace engineer. He looked up. "This was one of your lead scientists." "Yes," she said, "and the man who warned me weeks before the crash that someone inside the company was falsifying safety reports." James's instincts kicked in. A whistleblower, a mysterious crash, and now a break-in at the CEO's office? This wasn't random. He closed the file. "I'll need copies of everything here, and I want your security logs from tonight." She nodded and turned to her assistant. "Get him what he needs." As she moved closer, James noticed the faint smell of lavender. Subtle, clean, familiar. It caught him off guard. For a moment, it reminded him of Emily. His wife had worn the same scent. He pushed the thought away. Focus. "Do you have any idea who might want to hurt you?" he asked. Cernavca looked out the window, where snow hammered the glass like rain. "When you run an airline, detective, enemies are as common as flights. But whoever did this, they weren't after money, they were after silence." James studied her profile. There was something lonely about her, a quiet sadness behind the polished exterior. "Then we'll make sure they don't get it," he said. For a brief moment, she met his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them. By 3 a.m., the storm had intensified. Roads were closing. Federal backup was delayed. James made the decision to stay on site until morning. He walked out to the balcony to clear his head. Snow whipped across the skyline. Below, the city lights flickered under the storm. He thought of Liam, probably curled up with his teddy, dreaming about snowmen. Guilt twisted in his chest. He hated leaving him alone, even for one night. He took out his phone and opened the photo gallery. A picture of Emily and Liam at the lake stared back at him. Her smile, the wind in her hair, the day before the accident. He still remembered her laughter echoing through the woods before she disappeared. Search teams had found nothing. No body, no trace. The case had gone cold. But James never stopped wondering why. He pocketed the phone and stared into the storm. The snowflakes blurred the skyline, like memories fading in fog. Behind him, the door opened softly. "Couldn't sleep either?" Cernavca's voice asked. He turned. She stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. She offered one to him. "Thanks," he said, taking it. "Didn't think CEOs made coffee themselves." "Normally I don't," she said with a small, tired smile. "But desperate times." They stood there in silence for a moment, 2 strangers with too much on their shoulders. "Your son," she said suddenly. "How old is he?" 5, James replied. Her expression softened. "That's a beautiful age. My mother used to say children are proof life still believes in us." James chuckled quietly. "Your mother sounds wise." "She was," Cernavca said, "until life taught her otherwise." Something in her voice told him she'd lost people too. Snow blew across the balcony again. James glanced at her, wondering what she wasn't saying. He'd learned to read faces, and hers was carefully constructed, but her eyes betrayed fatigue and grief. "Do you ever wonder," she said after a pause, "why some people survive when others don't?" James looked into the night. Every day, their eyes met again. Two souls, different worlds, same emptiness inside. And neither realized yet that the same storm that had once taken his wife was about to bring both their lives crashing together again. The storm had passed by morning, leaving behind a frozen silence that seemed almost sacred. From the 18th floor of Skylift headquarters, the city looked like a painting, calm, deceptive, hiding chaos beneath. Detective James Carter sipped his cold coffee, eyes fixed on the files spread across the conference table. Cernavca Vale stood near the window, her posture composed but her eyes restless. "Federal agents will take over by noon," she said, her voice steady. "You won't need to babysit me after that." James looked up from the file. "I'm not babysitting. I'm investigating a threat. Big difference." A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Do you ever stop being a detective?" "Not really," he replied, closing the folder. "Especially when something doesn't add up." He tapped the flight report on the table. "The crash of Flight 92, the weather report says clear visibility, yet the official story calls it a weather failure." "Someone's lying," Cernavca turned, her gaze sharpening. "I've thought the same, but every time I push for answers, files disappear, employees resign, evidence vanishes." James nodded slowly. "Then whoever did this has reach, inside your company or higher." He paused. "Did your engineer, Dr. Keller, ever mention names?" She hesitated. "He left a message 2 days before the crash, a voicemail I didn't hear until after he died. He said, 'The mountain isn't what it seems.'" James frowned. "The mountain?" "The plane crashed in the Alps. He was on board." James's pulse quickened. The word mountain hit him like a blade. Emily had vanished during a hike in the Alps. Same area, same month. Coincidence or connection? He tried to steady his voice. "Send me the flight manifest. I want to check something." She nodded, noticing the change in his tone. "Is something wrong?" He avoided her eyes. "Just a thought." Later that day, James returned to his apartment. Liam ran to the door, barefoot, clutching his toy airplane. "Daddy!" he shouted. "You came back!" James dropped to one knee, scooping him up in his arms. "Of course, buddy. I told you I'd be back." Liam giggled, then looked at him curiously. "You smell like coffee and snow." James smiled faintly. "That's the smell of detective work." Liam frowned thoughtfully. "Did you find the bad guys?" "Not yet," James said softly, "but I'm close." He tucked Liam into bed later that night and sat by the window, laptop open. The flight manifest loaded on the screen. His heart pounded as he scrolled through the passenger list. There, row 17, seat A, Emily Carter. For a moment, the world went silent. His wife had been on that plane, but how? The reports said she'd gone missing during a hiking trip, nowhere near a flight manifest. He checked again and again. Same name, same date of birth, same photo ID. The file wasn't forged. It was real. His hands trembled. Emily hadn't disappeared on the mountain. She'd been on Flight 92. The next morning, he was back at Skylift. Cernavca was in her office reviewing reports. She looked up as he entered. "You found something," she said immediately. He laid the file on her desk. "My wife, Emily Carter. She was listed as a passenger on Flight 92. Cernavca's eyes widened. "That's impossible. I never saw her name." "She wasn't on the public list," James said, "but she was in the internal record, marked as confidential passenger." "Someone hid her." Cernavca stared at him, shaken. "Do you think she was working with Keller?" James hesitated. "She wasn't an engineer. She was a travel photographer, but she'd been covering a story on corporate corruption before she vanished." Realization struck both of them at once. "She was investigating Skylift," Cernavca whispered. James clenched his jaw. "Or someone inside it." Hours later, they sat together in the dim operations room, watching old surveillance footage from the crash investigation files. Snow, debris, fragments of wings, and voices over static. Then a sound, a woman's voice, faint but distinct, captured on the black box recording. "Mayday, this isn't weather." They knew. James's throat tightened. That voice, it was Emily's. He froze the frame, the static humming through the silence. Cernavca looked at him, her own eyes wide with disbelief. "That was your wife," James nodded slowly. "And now I need to know who made sure no one ever found her." Outside, the snow began to fall again, light and ghostly, as if the sky itself carried whispers of the truth waiting to be uncovered. And in that moment, for the first time in 2 years, Detective James Carter felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The following night, the city slept under a blanket of frost. Detective James Carter sat alone in his car, parked outside Skylift's restricted hangar. The yellow lights glowed dimly through the fog, casting long shadows across the runway. In the passenger seat, his laptop hummed, the screen filled with encrypted files that Cernavca had risked her career to copy. Inside those files were records, secret communications between Skylift executives, coded references to Operation Aurora, and one chilling line that made James's blood run cold. Passenger 17A secured. Journalistic interference neutralized 17A Emily Carter. He clenched his fists, his breath fogging up the windshield. Neutralized! The word echoed like a gunshot. Cernavca's voice crackled through the earpiece. "James, security rotation changes in 5 minutes. If you're going in, now's the time." "Copy that." He stepped out, pulling his coat tighter against the cold, and moved across the runway. The wind howled like a wounded animal, biting at his face. Every step reminded him of the mountain where he'd once searched for Emily, calling her name until his voice was raw. Now he was walking toward the same truth that had stolen her. Inside the hangar, silence. Rows of dismantled engines, flight recorders, and crates marked recovered debris. He switched on his flashlight. A faint trail of frost led toward a steel container at the far end. On the door, Flight 92. Archive. His heart pounded. He pushed it open. Inside were black boxes, labeled evidence bags, and a sealed envelope with the Skylift insignia. He tore it open and froze. Photos. Emily standing beside Dr. Keller, a hanger in the background, both smiling. The timestamp, 2 days before the crash. Scrawled beneath the image in red ink, prototype transfer successful. "James," Cernavca's voice came again, "you need to get out. I just got a ping. Internal alarms are live. They know someone's inside." He shoved the photos into his coat and moved fast. But before he reached the exit, a figure stepped from the shadows. Marcus Hale, Skylift's head of security. Broad-shouldered, stone-faced, eyes cold as the weather. "Detective Carter," he said calmly, "I was wondering when you'd dig up ghosts." James didn't slow. "Move." "Your wife was warned," Marcus said. "She got too close to the truth." "You will too." James stopped, eyes narrowing. "So you admit it?" Marcus smiled faintly. "I don't admit. I explain. The project she uncovered could have changed the industry. AI-assisted flight systems. Safer skies, fewer crashes. But the prototype failed. It caused Flight 92's malfunction." He took a step closer. "We covered it up to save millions of jobs, billions in investments. She refused to stay quiet." James's voice was low, trembling with restrained fury. "You murdered her?" "No," Marcus said. "The crash did." A shot rang out. James dove behind a crate as Marcus fired again, bullets splintering metal. He crawled, heart hammering, reaching for his gun. Then, silence. "James!" It was Cernavca's voice, echoing from the doorway. He looked up and saw Marcus turning toward her, raising his weapon. James stood and fired first. One clean shot. Marcus collapsed, his gun clattering to the floor. For a moment, the hangar fell deathly still. Cernavca stood frozen, breath ragged. "Is it over?" James looked down at Marcus's body. "No," he said softly, "not yet." Hours later, inside a government safe house, Cernavca uploaded every file to the press, to regulators, to international authorities. Skylift's name would burn before sunrise. James sat beside her, staring at the final folder, the one labeled Recovered Footage 92A. He clicked play. The screen showed the inside of the plane, moments before the crash, passengers panicking, alarms blaring, and then Emily. Her hair loose, face pale but steady. She was recording a video. If anyone finds this, Skylift isn't telling the truth. They knew the system failed. Keller tried to stop them. Tell Liam. Tell him I love him. The video ended with a flash of white. James stared in silence, tears stinging his eyes. Cernavca whispered, "She died a hero." He nodded slowly. She died alone, but not forgotten. Weeks passed. Snow melted into spring. The city buzzed again, full of life and noise. James sat on the park bench, watching Liam chase pigeons with his toy plane. The same plane Emily had bought him the day she left for the Alps. Cernavca walked up, coffee in hand. "He's getting faster," she said softly. James smiled faintly. "He gets that from his mom." They sat in silence for a moment, both looking at the child, the only piece of Emily the world couldn't destroy. "Are you going back to the force?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, I'm done chasing ghosts. I just want to raise my son." Cernavca nodded. "And maybe teach him to fly?" James looked at her, a rare smile touching his lips. "Yeah, maybe." That Liam ran back, holding out his toy plane. "Daddy, look! Mommy's plane can still fly." James took it gently, eyes glistening. "Yes, buddy, it always could."